Hello there. I decided to do this all at once. Decided I did the footwear impressions and I kind of decided to put everything together. It's pretty long, but anything different would be a disservice to how much work the team at CSI has done. So, I did a video on how they lifted the footwear impressions at Dana Roden's house crime scene 3 a while back. This video is going to be at Chris Roden Sr.'s. Then it's going to show you foot impressions, how they did that, and how they tied it all into the the shoes to, or the foot impressions to the Wagners. And video 3 ties it all up with the expert, William Bodziak. And he's a pretty good expert witness. He did the O.J. Simpson trial, and he explained, and they took it out, threw it out, but I left it in. But he said that the only reason they had to drop the footwear impression evidence at O.J.'s trial was they didn't have the shoes tied to OJ. Then after the trial, they did find pictures of OJ wearing those exact same kind of shoes. So, I thought that was interesting. And the other thing is I didn't really include his cross examine because it was all, he was there to mainly prove the size of those footwear impressions. They already knew they were Walmart shoes, but the cross examination, they were just trying to throw out the brand name too, and it really wasn't the brand name he had to be a witness to. It was the size of the brand name that he had to, and he proved that beyond a doubt. So without further whatever, I'm gonna give you the videos that I created. Enjoy. Okay, for those who don't know what this case is about, it's a case in Ohio, in Piketon, Ohio, it's southern Ohio, in the Appalachian Mountains, where, you got your poor people and very nice people, though. Family of four. Their names are George Wagner III, who also goes by Billy Wagner. George Wagner IV is the son of Billy and Angela. Angela Wagner and his brother Edward Jacob Wagner. He also has two grandmothers, the mother of George Wagner III, who was acquitted of her charges, and Rita Newcomb, who has not yet served her time for her charges. She hasn't started yet. Those two were basically interfering with the police officer, basically. However, Angela Wagner, the mother, and Edward Jake Wagner pled guilty earlier. And so the only two trials we have left, or had left, was George Wagner III and George Wagner IV. George Wagner IV has been found guilty of 8 aggravated murders, among other charges. and is sentenced to life in prison without parole. Edward Jake Wagner pled guilty, and Angela Wagner pled guilty, and they testified against George Wagner III. So that's that family. They decided that 8 other people of the same family with 3 different surnames were no longer to be able to live on the face of the earth because they were an inconvenience to them. Those family members now go by crime scene. Crime scene 1 is Christopher Roden Sr. He's the father of and brother and cousin of the rest of the deceased. Uh, and then he was with Gary Roden. Gary Roden is his cousin. Kenneth Roden was found in crime scene 4. That was his brother. His wife slash ex-wife, they were probably trying to work things out, but they were also co-parenting their 3 children. And his wife's name is Dana Manley Roden. She's a Manley. Now the Rodens and the Manleys got along very well, it seems. And inside Dana's home, which was crime scene 3, I'm going out of order, was Hannah Roden, her little 4-day-old baby, and Christopher Roden Jr. He was 16 years old. Hannah was 19. Hannah also had another child who was not with her at the time. She was with the father. And the father was none other than Edward Jacob Wagner. She was with the father, but apparently with the grandmother with Angela Wagner when these crimes occurred. Then you got crime scene 2, which is another child of Chris Roden Sr. and Dana Manley Roden. And his name is Frankie Roden. He was 20. He was in that trailer with his fiancee, Hannah Hazel Gilley. So now we got the Rodens, the Manleys, and the Gillies. And they were found deceased in their bed with their 6-month-old child in bed with them. And I think he was 3 years old. Frankie had another child with another lady, and the other lady had to work. So Frankie was watching his son. The children, the little ones, the 6-month-old, the 5-day-old or 3-day-old, and the toddler, I think is 3 years old, were unharmed in those trailers. So you got the teenagers and the adults that were all murdered in cold blood. This case I dreamt about. I woke up from a dream and it just got into my heart. So I've been waiting. And this has all occurred on the night into the early morning hours of April 21st through 22nd, 2016. It's been that long bringing this to justice. COVID happened. These families, the Rodens, the Manleys, and the Gillies, have been suffering in their hearts this whole time. We're hoping that Billy pleads out. They do not say anything to anybody until the day of the trial in case the defendant changes their mind with pleading out. So we won't know, and the families probably won't know until that day what's going on. We're hoping, there's hope that Billy Wagner III, I mean George Wagner III, who goes by Billy, will plead out. He's got an upcoming hearing on the 18th, I believe it is, or 19th of this month. It's a pretrial hearing. I'm hoping he pleads out. So where does that leave us? We got to understand, I want to understand more of what happened in the other trial. So I've been going through the trial piece by piece as I can. I've had the stomach bug in my house, so it kind of put a damper on me being able to do my work that I need to do. Okay, who's who in the legal team in the trial of George Wagner IV? The legal team will probably remain the same for Billy or George Wagner III, Billy Wagner. I don't know about the judge, but I think Rob Junk is still going to be the lead prosecuting attorney. For the prosecution, it's Angela Canepa. She's a special prosecuting attorney. Andrew Wilson, he's a special prosecuting attorney. And Ryan Schreider, BCI special agent. And that last name is not spelt wrong. I had to do a double take with that. Now, we had Judge Randy Daring that presided over this case. And then for George Wagner IV, we had Richard Nash, his defense attorney, and John Parker, defense attorney. I don't know their official names. So we'll just leave it at that. And when Billy Wagner's trial comes up, I'm going to be listening intently for who's who. I do have their names. His attorney's names. I think he has 3. And I'll listen to those. Now, I want to mention on here a couple things. I thought there were 3 footprint total in the trial. There's more. There's a lot more. I was very surprised. They had 2 that they lifted off of Dana's. It was 1.5 footprints that they sent to the lab. At the end of this video, I'm gonna put up the results of those analysis just for us. But in a previous video, I had explained or put up how they actually lifted the footprints at Dana's because somebody was confused how the blood got over there, and it wasn't blood that they lifted, it was transfer from a liquid, which could have been dew or rain. It rained that night, that morning. And what they did was step into some sort of liquid, not blood, and they made an imprint on the floor, and that's how it transferred. Um, And the blood footprints are a little different on how they do them, so I wanted to do this separate one with Chris Roden Senior's House Crime Scene 1 to show everybody how they did and lifted the blood footprints so that people would not be confused when Billy Wagner the third, I'm George Wagner the third's, Billy Wagner's trial comes up. It'll be easier for us to understand. There were 4 samples sent to the lab from Chris Senior's house, which was crime scene 1. Makes a total of 6 samples sent to the lab, all different footprint evidence. And like I said, I'll, at the end of this, put up a an analysis of what they were, what they found out. Okay, what I have up here is the floor plan of Chris Senior's that I have. And it's so blurry. It's it's like crooked, and I just, quite honestly, I couldn't find anything better to do it with. So I kind of redid this floor plan. I wanted to show you what I had as opposed to what I did, just so that you would know that I really didn't mess with any of it. My floor plan, I don't have all the evidence on it yet because I just wanted to put the blood evidence. So there is my, the floor plan I had. And here is my floor plan that I made. You will see my floor plan in this video. Now, another thing I wanted to say is that the family really wanted to keep things private. So in this video, because they didn't show the bloody evidence and they didn't show the pictures and we didn't get to see any of that. It was just all family and George. And because I had enough of seeing George, he's a murderer. And out of more so respect, out of respect for the family, you will not be seeing the video part of this. I think the family has been exposed too much, if you will. They need their peace. And it's going to all happen again at Billy's trial. So, I really want to, in my videos, kind of, where I can, respect the families and not show them. I did discuss this with somebody, and they honestly agreed. Then there was one more thing I wanted to say, and then we'll get on with the blood evidence. This isn't a story. This isn't from television. It's not made for TV. It's not, if it's gonna be called a story, it's not my story to tell. It's not your story to tell. This is the story of Chris Roden Sr., Dana Mary Manley Roden, Frankie Roden, Hannah Roden, Christopher Roden Jr., Hannah Hazel Gilly, Gary Roden, and Kenneth Roden. And then you add little 3-day-old, 5-day-old baby rodent. Then you add a 3-year-old, 2-year-old toddler rodent or toddler Wagner. And then you add another toddler Wagner. And then you add another toddler rodent. And then you add another 6-month toddler rodent. If anybody, you want to call it a story, it's their story. The other thing is to me, it's really not a story. It's their life experience. So to be anything but respectful would be disrespectful to them. Comments, anything. And I don't ever want to be disrespectful to them. I want them to get through this. I want Billy Wagner, hence George Wagner III, to plea out so that they don't have to go through another trial, and they won't have to say the name Wagner ever, ever, ever again. So let's get on with the evidence, shall we?
You testified earlier about noticing shoe prints in this scene.
Yes.
If you could, tell us a little bit about shoe print evidence. How is shoe print evidence deposited in an area? Just give us some basics.
Well, it could be a number of ways in this particular way. Obviously, if you have a bloody footwear or shoe print, then you would have to have first of all, have a source of that blood. So we know that a bloodletting event would occur, and for that blood to get on the bottom of that shoe, an individual would have to be in that vicinity where the bloodletting event occurred in order to get blood deposited on the bottom of their shoe. And if that individual then walked, then that individual would transfer blood from the bottom of their shoe, in this case to a floor, and ultimately you would have a footwear impression in blood.
And with respect to, let's use blood since we're talking about blood, and footprints, is it more likely, based on your knowledge, your training, your experience, is it more likely for a shoe print to be tracked or picked up in blood when that blood is wet or fresh as opposed to dry and old?
Absolutely, yes.
So to that end, as part of your work at a scene, when you have an imprint, a shoe imprint that may be related to the crime or the crime scene, do you try to document that or collect that so that it can be examined later on by experts?
Yes, I do.
Walk the jury through how you go about collecting and documenting footprint. Let's start with documenting first. Documenting footprint evidence.
Well, before you can document a footprint, obviously you have to locate it. We located these shoe impressions, and one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is these impressions were found. I testified earlier that I saw them before I ever entered. When I first entered, obviously after we had the search warrant, I knew where the footwear impressions were, and at that point I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to process those, what kind of photography I would be doing, what kind of chemicals, if any, I would use. And so I took something which was parchment paper that is supplied, we had on our crime scene vehicles. Parchment paper was used quite frequently for us to package bloody evidence to keep it from transferring blood to another substance. At that point, the footwear impressions and the blood was dry when I got there. And so I actually took parchment paper, we laid it over the footwear impressions, and due to the fact that there was only going to be one other agent working with me, which was Agent Price, we both knew that parchment paper means don't step there. And so that's how we were able to preserve this evidence while we were continuing to work the scene. Now, to the point of what I did at that particular time, yes, I would document the location, and I've tried to do that with these overall shots so that you can, or anybody can look at these shots later, these photographs, and be able to tell, well, I know where the plywood is, and I know where the footwear impression is in relation to the plywood, so I know basically where they're at in the house. That's the ultimate goal. From there, you would move up closer, and you would ultimately scale that footwear impression and try to get as much characteristics or detail from that footwear impression as possible. There were some methods that I used. For instance, one of the footwear impressions that I collected, I used a chemical called leucocrystal violet. Leucocrystal violet is a chemical that we would apply to for instance, in this case, a bloody footwear impression, and it will actually help enhance detail in that actual footwear impression that is not really visible or is latent to the eye when we're trying to look at it. So if I see half of a footwear impression and I put leucocrystal violet on that footwear impression, then I may see the whole footwear impression.
And leucocrystal violet, does it alter the footprint or just enhance it so you can see it better?
It enhances it. Leucocrystal violet, when we mix it, it would come in two parts. One would be the leucocrystal violet, the other would be hydrogen peroxide. I think it was 1:4 mixture. And one thing about the leucocrystal violet is it has a fixative in it. And a fixative means that it's not supposed to make the footwear impression swell. It's supposed to hold the blood where it's at. So if I apply it properly, then it should hold that footwear impression and keep it from growing and getting bigger.
Is a decision made to actually cut out the area around the footprint so that you could preserve it?
Yes, there were a couple that I actually did cut out. I cut the whole floor with it, which was another reason why we waited to the end. I told you earlier that we covered these and preserved them. I knew that it was going to be messy, and it really was a chore to get through the flooring to get these up. So that was another reason why we put the parchment paper, and I believe we actually put these large boxes. They look similar to a pizza box. Turned it upside down so there's actually no pressure on it. And we were able to go back later when we were closer to the end, when we felt like we had gotten the majority of what we could get done at that time, and then we did cut those up.
Can you give me State's Exhibit A185? All right, State's Exhibit A185. Can you tell us what we're looking at in State's Exhibit A185?
In A185, again, it's I think we're familiar with the general location. We had swabs taken from that area earlier. We have the chair, we have the alterations in the blood stain going toward the kitchen, and then we begin to see some faint footwear impressions.
And with respect to those two prints that you first talked about, did you identify those with evidence, placards, and BCI numbers?
Ultimately, yes, we did.
And was one of those ultimately identified as item number 23?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And where in the picture, where in the diagram was item 23?
It's in this area.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes, or put up what's been marked as State's Exhibit A283. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at there?
I'm sorry, coming your way. This is actually the footwear impression, one of the footwear impressions, and I believe this would have ultimately be marked as item number 23.
Would you take different pictures of those under different lighting? So some brighter lighting, some less lighting, so you could pick up the detail on them?
Yes, you would sometimes change your camera lens to a macro lens. Sometimes you would use no flash, lower flash, sometimes use oblique lighting. Whatever you could do to try to get as much detail of that particular object.
Can you give me State's Exhibit A284. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at with State's Exhibit A284?
Yes, in Exhibit 284, it's basically the same footwear impression. I believe we've established it was item number 23. I'm starting to pan in a little closer, and I'm starting to see some characteristics of the shoe that I think somebody more qualified than me should ultimately be aware of.
Okay. And again, when you talk about somebody more qualified than you, are you talking about the experts back at your lab or experts?
Absolutely,
external?
yes.
And when you talk about detail, what's standing out to you where you're like, uh-oh, they may be able to do something with this?
What's actually standing out to me at that particular time was the fact that, can I stand again, please?
Sure.
In this area of the shoe, I'm not seeing any kind of wear pattern at all.
Okay.
That meant something to me.
Okay. And again, ultimately, our opinions with respect to what that means established or given by the experts in the lab.
Yes.
But at some point, you know, or do you know, you got to collect that?
Yes, I do.
All right. Can you give us a State's Exhibit A286? Again, as part of your documentation, do you put a ruler next to these prints and start documenting how they look with a ruler or a measurement next to them?
Yes, we try to scale those as best as possible and have our scale as accurate or as flat on the surface as we can. It does make a difference.
State's Exhibit A285.
A285. Are we ready?
Yes.
Once again, it's another photograph. It's basically the same footwear impression, but we're continuing to get a little closer.
And State's Exhibit A287.
A287, once again, same footwear impression, just a little closer.
Okay. And again, are you trying to document this as closely as possible and from as many different angles as possible so that later the experts can look at how they looked the day that you saw them?
Absolutely, yes.
State Exhibit 288. And at some point, did you put your BCI item number or photo placard down next to this so you could identify that mark?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And is that what's depicted in State Exhibit A289?
Basically the same photograph. Camera's actually sitting on a tripod, not moving, and I just slid a item 23 in there so that we could have that later for identification purposes.
In addition, you've been focusing in on that area of the tread that you pointed out. Did you take other pictures that showed other areas of the tread with respect to that shoe print?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A290. Again, can you tell the jury what we're looking at there in A290?
A290, it's the same photograph with item number 23. I've just panned in a little closer, zoomed in, and trying to get more detail in the heel area, or what I believe to be the heel area of that shoe.
Now, you testified that after you documented this, and again, it looks like you took plenty of pictures. After you documented this shoe print, you testified that at some point you actually cut that piece of flooring up.
Yes,
correct?
at some point. Yeah, it was later.
Walk us through, or walk the jury through, what you did to cut that flooring out.
At the particular time, I said that I had parchment paper, and ultimately I took some tape. I had already removed the parchment paper at that point to do some more photography, to number it and to scale it. And I put more parchment paper on that, taped the outer perimeters, and then went to work on it, cutting it with power tools.
Okay. Were you able to successfully remove that piece of flooring?
Yes.
I'll show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit here. I'll take those. State's Exhibit A508. You recognize the markings on State's Exhibit A508?
Yes, I do. A508, this is, earlier I actually said that we had boxes that looked like pizza boxes. This is one of those. We would use these to package clothing, bloody clothing, footwear impressions, anything that we wanted to try our best to preserve that so that it wouldn't be crushed or smashed. And this is actually one of my boxes. You can see that I have initialed it, as well as have my evidence labeling it as item number 23.
Now, there are all kinds of other markings on that item.
Yes.
When it goes to various labs or various people take that for testing, is it standard practice for folks to put their marks on it, or maybe their own individual case number on it?
Yes, normally after something is opened, then it's resealed. The individual that opens it and reseals it, they will seal it, and then they will put their initials, and it's sometimes case number, but mostly it's their initials.
I'm going to have you open that exhibit. Do you recognize the item that's inside State's Exhibit A508?
Yes, I do.
And if you could, I'm going to have you just slowly walk that in front of the jury. Tell them what that is.
This is basically what we've been seeing in the photographs. Earlier I said I put on a chemical called leucocrystal violet, which will ultimately dye that stain, and it will bring out portions of that blood stain that we cannot see without that dye.
Item State's Exhibit 508, was that item collected, maintained, and stored in accordance with your training and standard operating procedures?
Yes, it is, and it was.
Was that shoe impression there ultimately sent to your lab and other labs for experts to take a look at it?
Yes, it was.
And again, I don't want you to tell me what the results were, but do you know if other experts were able to form an opinion about the brand and size of the shoe that made that impression?
I believe so, yes.
In addition to that shoe print, were you able to collect the other shoe print that was right in that area?
Yes.
Okay. And again, was that shoe print, that one that we just showed was 23. Did you have one that you marked as BCI item number or photo placard item 24?
I believe so, yes.
Can you give me State's Exhibit A291? Yeah, State's Exhibit A291 up there.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what they're looking at with respect to State's Exhibit A291?
Again, it's a transfer of blood causing a footwear impression in blood on the floor. It's in the living room area and somewhat close to item number 23.
And again, I put up that diagram, or both items 23 and 24 depicted in the overhead diagram that we changed out and displayed for the jury.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. In addition to the prints that you marked as items 23 and 24, was there another print that you marked as item 47?
Yes, there was.
I'm going to put on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A427.
Yes.
Can you tell us, or tell the jury, what's depicted in State's Exhibit A427?
A427 is a photograph where a scale has already been applied. Obviously, there were previous photographs. We actually saw some of those. But it's a scale of a partial footwear impression close to the front entrance door to the residence.
And could you do me a favor? Could you use the pointer and show the jury on the diagram where that item is?
That's right here, number 47.
Okay. And is that, in the picture there, is that the door that's depicted there on the left?
Yes, it is.
We talked about that blood trail, and so far in your testimony you've tracked it basically through the living room towards the kitchen. I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A373. Can you orient the jury to that picture?
A373, so far the majority of the photographs we've looked at, and I keep telling the same thing, that they're from generally the front door area. Now, I am now beyond that point, and I'm back into the kitchen area, and now I'm focusing forward back toward the living room area. This is one of the first photographs we've seen from this angle.
And the rugs that you had talked about near the disruption in that blood pattern, are those visible in that picture?
Yes, they are.
I'll show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A372. As part of your work in this case, did you just keep tracking that blood trail through the kitchen and to where it ultimately led up?
Yes, I did.
Is that 372?
It's 373.
Let me get A372. Okay. Again, can you tell the jury what we're looking at here and where that picture is taken from?
Once again, this is taken from the kitchen area. You can see the treadmill, the rugs. Earlier we looked at a blue tote and a kitchen table, and if you recall, item number 33 was under that, which was the Hornady 40 caliber cartridge case. So now we're in that general area, and begin to see footwear impressions there as well.
All right. State's Exhibit A371. Continue to walk us through where that blood trail's going and what they're looking at.
There's some things here that are very remarkable to me. First of all, yes, we're in the kitchen area, and we're moving back toward the bedroom area where ultimately both victims would have been dragged after the murders. You see blood on the floor and the directionality going that direction, but then you begin to see footwear impressions that are on top of the blood that would indicate that the individual that drugged them back there then walked back through that area.
And show the jury where this footwear impression is or what you're looking at there.
There's some partials in this area and a partial up in that area near the rug.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A374. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at with respect to State's Exhibit A374?
Yes, A374 again is another footwear impression, and you can see some consistency throughout the scene. The footwear impressions that we have already looked at in photos. This obviously is in the kitchen area, and this would be going back before any scales or anything of that nature were applied.
In State's Exhibit 375, A375?
Yes, A375, once again, it's basically the same photograph that we saw. Ultimately, this is going to be listed as item number 35, but for purposes of documentation, no scales or no rules have been placed there yet.
Okay, so where we're at is in the other video we saw how they looked at the shoe print evidence or footwear impression evidence from crime scene number 3, which was Dana Rodin's house. and they had actually lifted three prints, three footwear impressions and gel prints to send to get analyzed. Now we just seen Chris Senior's house, which was crime scene 1, with all the footwear evidence they got, footwear impressions. I was amazed. It wasn't 3 shoe prints or footwear impressions. It was 3 footwear impressions at Dana's. Then they lifted 4 footwear impressions at Chris Senior's. And there were many, many more that they just couldn't discern. So basically, they had been a messy people at Chris Roden Senior's with that blood. I didn't think they banked on how much blood there would be. So part of the time that they spent at Chris Senior's, I think, you know, they were probably trying to get blood off their shoes so that they didn't carry them to the crime scenes. Partly. Okay, in the last video, what I did was I expanded the first footwear impression they did to tell you how they lifted it. Basically, all the rest of the footwear, the other 3 footwear impressions, they lifted it the same exact way. So I didn't show the whole video where they're asking the same questions about the other 3 footprints because all the questions were the same answer. Now, I want to remind you before we go into this, at the funerals with the Rodens, we had the shoe size that was in question. Everybody saying, "Oh yeah, Billy's feet didn't have to be that big." Well, just to let you know, again, look at Jake's feet according to Billy's feet in this picture. Billy's feet are so much larger than Jake's. So, that going into this next video, I think we need to take this into consideration when we're thinking about the Walmart shoes and how they got them. Okay, now that I fixed my popping sound, I'm gonna have to just speak a little bit louder. How the shoes got tied to the Wagners now. We have the the shoe print impressions from Dana's house and from Chris Roden Sr.'s house. So how did they match them up? Well, they hit the jackpot when they went to the trailers that the Wagner stored items in because they found the actual Walmart receipt there that paid for 2 pairs of Walmart athletic shoes that they purchased on 4/7/2016, just days before the event happened on April 21st in the late night and then the wee hours of the mornings of April 22nd, 2016. They matched them up. They got the date, which you can barely see the date on the Walmart receipt. One of these receipts is the whole receipt, and the other one is just panning in on the SKU numbers of the sneakers that were purchased. And there is a date down there. You can very faintly see it. It says 4/7/2016. And they actually went to Walmart, first of all, Walmart did cooperate. They pulled the videos. And this is off the videos of the middle picture is Angela leaving Walmart that day with her purchase. And then the other 2 are the vehicles she was in. The one to the left, if you're looking at it, it actually shows somebody in that passenger seat, so she was with someone. And then the other one just shows it pulling away from the curb. And there was another one I did not decide to use. It was just pulling out of the Walmart parking lot in general. They went in, they found they found the athletic shoes. They matched the SKUs up to the ones on the sneakers, which they always match up. And there's a different SKU for a different sneaker, different size, all that. So they actually got the SKU where they found the 11 wide and the 10.5 wide. And that's what they were. Now, one of the sneakers, one of the athletic sneakers, shoes, was rung in twice by accident, and you can see where my star is. They did delete that one. So there was only 2 pairs of shoes that were purchased that day. I have to say, these people spent hours and hours on this case. And the way they put everything together is amazing in that trial. And I mean, I don't think they could have done a better job. There's so many manpower. I think they should make criminals pay back all the money that they took and spent for this. And this was for years. So the Wagners owe these people something. They'll never get it, but they owe it. Okay, I'm gonna let us. I didn't do the videos of where they, went into the Walmart stores and got this. I just figured a picture was worth 1,000 words. So what I did do though is I'm doing a video on how they got the shoe impressions. And the shoe impressions are important because they show how they got the gross feet of the Wagners. Billy Wagner, George Wagner III, and George Wagner the Fourth. I keep on saying that wrong. And then Jake Wagner. I've put together this picture. You're gonna see this evidence in the video. As a matter of fact, the picture of George didn't come out until the cross-examination of him because they wanted to show, yes, George cooperated. He had no choice. They want to look like they're innocent, correct? Well, what you'll see is Jake Wagner's foot impression came out of the box. However, he didn't bother taking the rest of them out because they're all the same. You see one foot impression, I guess you see them all, you know. But I really would have loved to see the comparison of Jake and George's feet impressions to Billy's in this. So, anyways, here's the video. Without further ado, I know you guys love me talking, but I would rather not.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer unto God?
I do.
You may be seated. State and exam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Welcome back, Lieutenant.
Good morning.
Could you go ahead and restate your name for the record, please?
Lieutenant Brian White.
And Lieutenant, again, we've already covered for the jury that you were the primary crime scene agent in this case, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And can you tell us, was there a point in this investigation where Jake, George, and Billy Wagner were required to appear at the Pike County Sheriff?
Let me pause it right here for a minute. Yes, this video is coming out of one ear. The way the people recorded the stuff was really funny. So that's from the video itself, not from me.
Sheriff's Office in order for you to take various measurements of their feet and also to get fingerprints and palm prints.
That's correct.
Okay. And can you tell us why that was conducted?
The investigative team had made the decision to have an outside expert review some of the evidence that was found in the case, and this specifically footwear impressions. So we contracted with a forensic expert by the name of William Bodziak, and he's out of right around Daytona Beach, Florida, and he's one of the foremost experts in footwear impressions. He's trained laboratory personnel. He's done crime scene work, collecting it in the field, and he's really.
You indicated that the investigative team made a decision to have an outside expert. Did you participate in that decision?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you participate in recommending Mr. Bodziak?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you were familiar with him prior to that time when you made that recommendation?
That's correct.
Okay. And had you made contact with him prior to requiring Jake and George and Billy Wagner to come to the sheriff's office to get these, conduct these measurements and other things?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you receive instruction by Mr. Bodziak as to what items he needed and how to go about obtaining them?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you just tell us generally what it was that you were setting out to do?
He gave me the list of things that he wanted in order to be able to do a comparison, and the things that were required of our agency to collect and give to him.
Okay. And so can you tell us what some of the items that you had already collected that he was interested in?
Objection.
I'm sorry.
Objection to what Mr. Bodziak was interested in.
Well, I'm going to overrule that objection.
Go ahead.
The evidence that we'd recovered at the crime scenes was what he was going to be comparing.
Okay. And specifically, what evidence are you referring to?
The footwear impressions recovered from scene 3 and scene 1.
Okay. And can you tell us what kinds of things did he want you to do regarding the feet of Jake and George and Billy Wagner?
He requested that
But overrule the objection. The answer.
He requested that that I take a tracing using a pen of the right and left foot of all three, Jake, Billy, and George. He requested that we use a measuring device to measure the feet without shoes on. So it'd be the same, we use the same type of device that you would use at a shoe store. And took measurements from that. And he also requested a mold or a foam impression of the right and left feet of all three.
Okay. And so that was something that you set about to conduct and then provide to him, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what is marked at States Exhibit YY1. And if you could look at that first, and then I will ask you to open that up just so we can see what exactly that looks like.
Okay.
And can you tell us what that is?
That's a foam impression of the right foot of Jake Wagner.
Okay, and if you don't mind opening that up.
I think you're right there.
I don't know where they go.
Thank
tell us, was that material that you already had, or did you have to order that?
We had to order this. We didn't have any
Okay.
thought.
And was this something you'd ever done before?
I have never done that before, no.
Okay. And can you tell us what date that was that you obtained that, you conducted these things?
July 23rd, 2018.
Okay. And then I'll go ahead and just have you identify these other items. YY2.
That's the left foot foam impression from Jake Wagner.
And then YY3. No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. That is the right foot impression from George Wagner IV.
That's what I handed you.
Right foot impression, yeah.
Okay. And YY4?
This is the foam impression of the left foot of George Wagner IV.
Okay. George Wagner IV, also being known as George.
George, yeah.
Okay. And then YY5?
This is the biofoam impression or the foam impression of the right foot of George Wagner III or Billy Wagner.
Okay. And then YY6?
That is the left foot impression, foam impression from Billy Wagner.
Okay. And again, these were all collected on that same July 23rd of 2018.
That's correct.
They all three came down at the same time?
Yes.
Basically. And then you indicated that you were also asked to do tracings, correct?
Yes, I was.
I'm going to hand you what's being marked as States Exhibit YY7. And same thing, if you could go ahead and tell us what that is, and then I will ask you to open that up so you can show it to the jury.
This is an envelope that contains the right foot and left foot tracing of Jake Wagner.
And then handing you what's been marked as States Exhibit YY8, and you do not need to remove that.
This is an envelope containing the right and left foot tracings of George Wagner.
Okay. And then YY9.
The right and left foot tracings of Billy Wagner.
And then YY10, if you could tell us what this is.
That's an envelope that contains the pen that I used to do the tracings of the feet for all three, George, Billy, and Jake.
Okay. And then you indicated that you also did measurements by a contraption that you often see in shoe stores. Can you just describe to us what that was, and then did you also collect those measurements?
Yeah, the foot measuring tool is the same one, the same device that you see in a shoe store when they measure your foot at a shoe store, and it measures the length and the width and the arch length of your foot. And in order to document that, each individual, their right and left foot, they stepped on the device, and photographs were taken of the measurements as the device was set with each foot in the device.
And you collected those measurements, and was that something that you also provided to Mr. Bodziak?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you tell us, regarding these exhibits that you've just identified, States Exhibit Y1 through Y10, along with the measurements and I believe the other any other information and evidence that Mr. Bodziak wanted, were you responsible for actually delivering that to Mr. Bodziak?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And did you actually hand deliver it?
I did. I drove it to his office in Florida and hand delivered it. And then when he was through with his examination, I picked it up from him and brought it back to the London BCI office.
Okay. You drive
I drove.
down there? Okay. And why did you choose to do that as opposed to mailing it or something else?
They were just, they were pieces of evidence, and it's best to be hand delivered and handled, for purposes. So that's why the decision was made to drive it.
Okay. And do you recall approximately how long it took him to do that?
I believe it was around 2 days to do his examination.
Okay. And were you then responsible for bringing it back at the end of that?
Yes.
And put them back in the property room where they remained?
I did. When he was through with his examination, I picked him up and drove him to our office there at BCI.
Okay, before I get into the next video, I think is the most interesting part. I think it really was stupid of Angela to buy brand new Walmart shoes. Then on top of it, Jake is worried about transferring mud and stuff from his house to the Rodin's house. And then, because he thinks they can take dirt samples and compare them. Well, they didn't do anything to the treads. They didn't like file them or anything. So what Angela did purchasing those shoes actually was a give me to the forensic experts as far as give me some experience, because we're going to find out who did this, because we're going to know the treads. And on top of it, it was testified that George left a blood footprint that he knew about. He wanted to go back and smear it, and Billy told him no. So they were bound to be able to take these shoes and link them back to the Wagners. Brand new shoes, brand new treads, no wear and tear pattern whatsoever. No dirt in them, nothing. They're brand new. So it was a give me. Let's go on to the next video and last. And I'm not going to talk after this, so after this video, you have a great day and an even better tomorrow.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer unto God?
I do.
You may be seated. And the statement of exam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
William J. Bodziak, B-O-D-Z-I-A-K.
Okay. And Mr. Bodziak, can you tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a forensic consultant and examiner. I specialize in the area of footwear and tire impression evidence.
Okay. And can you tell us how long you have been doing that?
Since 1973.
Okay. And can you tell us what qualifies you to be a forensic footwear impression examiner?
I was appointed as a special agent of the FBI in 1970, and because of my science background, I was appointed or transferred to the FBI laboratory in 1973. I underwent 3 years of training and remained in the laboratory in that capacity for about 25 years. And upon retirement, I have been doing it privately since then.
Okay. And were you doing footwear impressions during that time with the FBI?
Yes, the entire time, yes.
Okay. And you indicated, after you retired, you continued to do footwear impression.
Yes, I retired in 1998, and in 1999 I began a forensic consultancy involved the examination of evidence, consulting with attorneys, and teaching forensic classes to law enforcement.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I have an undergraduate degree in biology, and I have a Master of Science in Forensic Science from George Washington University.
Okay. And can you tell us, do you provide trainings in this area?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell us, are those trainings basically all around the world?
Yes, they began at the FBI Academy in 1983, and I've taught many classes in Australia, New Zealand, throughout Europe, Hungary, Germany, Poland, and other countries.
Okay. And have you written books in the area of footwear impression?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How many books have you written?
3 in footwear and 1 in tire.
Okay. And are those books used, again, around the world when training individuals regarding footwear impression?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Can you tell us, could you put a number on how many footwear impression comparisons you have done?
I've been working them so extensively since 1973. There would have been thousands of cases, and each of those could have involved hundreds of examinations.
Okay. And can you tell us, have you done comparisons for both the state and the defense?
Yes.
Okay. And again, is that around the world?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Mr. Bodziak, I'm going to approach you with what has been marked as State's Exhibit WW-1. If you could just look at that briefly and tell me what that is.
This is a copy of my curriculum vitae.
Okay. And can you tell us, have you testified in both federal and state and local courts?
Yes, I have.
And military courts?
Yes.
And also, of course, foreign courts?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell us, have you been involved in some fairly high-profile cases as well?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And if you could just name a few of those.
The Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols trials for the Oklahoma bombing, That was tire impression evidence. The O.J. Simpson case, the Bruno Mollies. There's a huge case in Africa on Fred Vander Weifer. There's one Tair Rada in Israel. And there's another one, and the name slips my mind, but it was in Canada.
Okay. And referring specifically to the O.J. Simpson case, you did identify the shoes that left the impressions at the crime scene, correct?
I located the brand and size shoe. The actual shoes were never found, and my request was to size the shoe, first to determine what brand it was. They were not able to find the brand, and I located it, and then to size that.
Okay. And are you aware if after the trial they were able to locate or found evidence that O.J. did actually?
There were pictures of Mr. Simpson at the Buffalo-Miami football game that was actually celebrating him, where the pictures show he was wearing the Bruno Molly shoes, yes.
Okay. But that was not discovered until after the trial?
That's correct.
Concluded. Okay.
Sure. Well, as to when it was discovered in that case, I will sustain the objection and order that response stricken, but the rest of this testimony is remain.
Okay. Can you tell us, do you have any organizational affiliations in respect to footwear impression?
Yeah, the first organization I joined was the American Academy of Forensic Science in around 1980 or 81. And I was active both in footwear and question document examination. As I winded down my practice in the past few years, I no longer kept up my membership in that organization, but I was the chairman of the document section and made presentations on footwear impression evidence to that organization. Also, I'm a member of the International Association for Identification, which is the largest forensic group in the country, and I was subcommittee chairman for the footwear and tire group of examiners at that point, and I am still a member, active member of that organization.
And have you also, in addition to publishing books, have you also published articles, again, regarding footwear impression?
Yes, I have.
And have you also provided peer review for other professionals or other experts in this field when they are publishing articles?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And have you received extensive training as well as the trainings that you provide in footwear impressions?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would request that Mr. Bodziak be qualified to testify as an expert in the area of footwear impressions.
The defendant will be and is recognized as an expert qualified to testify concerning footwear impressions.
Okay. Mr. Bodziak, can you kind of walk us through how you go about making a footwear impression comparison?
Okay, there are 4 areas of the bottom of a shoe known as the outsole that are typically examined separately. The first is the design, because that's when you look at the bottom of the shoe, that's the first thing you see. And obviously that design comes in many different sizes. Shoe size, the label on the inside, but that also relates to the difference in dimensions on the outside. So the second area would be the physical dimensions of that outsole. And there's different ways that manufacturers change the bottom of that shoe, the outsole, as it goes through the size range. The third area would be the general wear. As you wear that shoe, the frictional forces between that shoe and the surface erode, wear away like sandpaper, the bottom of the shoe gradually. As that is worn away, its appearance changes, and the appearance will show up in a questioned crime scene impression as well as on the shoe and test impressions you make of the shoe. And the fourth area would be what we call RACs, for randomly acquired characteristics. And they're called that because they are anything that the shoe acquires, either something like chewing gum stuck in it, or a cut or scratch, something that's either removed or added to the shoe, but in a random, unintended fashion that would contribute to making that shoe different than others of that same size and design.
Okay. And can you tell us how are impressions made? So if I'm walking across the floor, how are impressions made on a surface?
Well, there's two-dimensional and three-dimensional impressions. Three-dimensional, of course, would be in sand, soil, mud, snow. Occasionally you'll have somebody drop the can of flour in the kitchen during the crime and they step in that. There's exceptions, but mainly it's soil and sand and snow. And then you have two-dimensional. And two-dimensional can involve just the dust from the shoe. It may be latent, meaning it's invisible. Unless you process it a certain way, it may be visible. You have blood that can be stepped in at a crime scene. And you also have very light coatings of mud or dirt or other things that aren't deep enough for three-dimension, but still produce a two-dimensional impression.
And can you tell us how those then impressions are preserved, or for you to be able to make a comparison?
So depending on whether they're three or two-dimensional, in either case, they would always be photographed first, because that's what we call a non-destructive method of recovering them. And that photography would involve using a scale, a ruler, placed alongside of that impression, so that later when an examination is made, it can be enlarged to its actual size that it was at the crime scene. In the case of three-dimensional impressions after photography, we would want a cast of the impression. And in cases of two-dimensional impressions, it would depend what they are in. If it's dust, you might use a gelatin lifter, you might use an electrostatic lifter, other methods to enhance and locate those impressions. If it's blood, you would use a number of different chemical enhancement methods where the chemicals actually darken the blood and make it easier to work with because you'll be able to see more detail.
Okay. And are you familiar with leucocrystal violet?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell us what that is?
Leucocrystal violet is a peroxidase reagent, meaning that in the presence of hydrogen peroxide, it reacts with a material in the heme, H-E-M-E, group of blood, and it turns it purple or violet. So it's a method that's been around. A similar method's been used for fingerprints for years. This is an application that's used specifically for footwear impression evidence. So it can be sprayed at a crime scene to locate impressions that you already see, but you want to enhance them. And in a lot of cases, it will actually show up impressions that they were so faint you didn't see them until you sprayed this on them.
Once you have an impression from a crime scene, tell us how you go about making the comparison.
So in most cases, I'm working with a shoe of either a person that's believed to have committed the crime or a person that they want to exclude their shoes from committing the crime. That could be law enforcement officer shoes, paramedic shoes, someone that discovered a victim's shoes. But it also could be a person who's suspected of leaving the impression. And in those cases, I would make test impressions and photographs of the shoes to supplement and use in the comparison. In other cases, there may not be any shoes, and I'm only being requested to determine the brand of the shoe and the size of that shoe, and for whatever investigative assistance that may provide in a case.
Okay. And can you tell us, when you are asked to determine the size and the brand of a shoe, what things are you looking at to make those determinations?
Well, the size, you can always do more with sizing if you know the brand and you have exemplars or samples of those shoes. So the first step would be to attempt to determine the brand of the shoes. And for that purpose, major laboratories have computer databases. Back when I started in the 1970s, we didn't have that, so we put them in notebooks and separated them by whether they're a herringbone pattern or circular pattern or other types. And now with the computer database, it's possible to do a more efficient job at that. In cases where the computer database does not reveal that design, it's helpful to go as soon as possible after the crime, not wait a year or two later when the shoe designs in stores change, but to do it fairly quickly and go to local shoe stores to see if you can find that design in a local shoe store, because it may not be in a database. Once you establish the brand of the shoe, then depending on the way that shoe is made and other factors, what you have in the crime scene impression, is it just a little smidgen or is it several full impressions? Then you would more than likely get samples of those shoes from the store, or if you had the cooperation of the manufacturer, you would get them from the manufacturer.
Okay. And then once you've obtained those shoes that you believe may be corresponding brand, etc., what do you do with those shoes that you've purchased now?
Okay, then I would make test impressions for the purpose of making a physical comparison with the features that show up in the impressions left at the crime scene. So that methodology would start with a side-by-side comparison. Obviously, if it was a similar design, but you could quickly say, oh no, but this one has 3 circles and this one has 9, you could exclude it just by looking at it that way and document that. If everything you look at side by side seems to agree, then you would take a test impression in a clear format, such as on a piece of clear plastic or film, and you would place it over top of that natural size shoe impression from the crime scene. And you would be able to look at not only the design, but the physical dimensions of that design at the same time. You could compare those simultaneously. And you would see, does this agree, or am I now able to exclude it because it looks like a similar design, but it's an inch short, or there's 4 bars in the heel and there's only 3 in the shoe, things of that nature. If it agreed, then you would go forward with the exam. And you could get into more detailed things like features on the shoe, general wear, randomly acquired characteristics like the cuts and scratches I mentioned, or things like texture, which is actually part of the design, but it's a small application of design on the shoe that's harder to see visually and requires enlargement and a little bit more detailed examination. Okay.
And talk to us about that texture. How is texture placed on a shoe? Or the
well, I brought a lot of slides to show that. It would be much easier if I showed them to explain that.
Okay. No. First one. First slide. Yeah. I'm just going to call this WW3A for the first. Okay. Go ahead and tell us what we are looking at here.
Okay, this is an educational slide to help explain where texture comes from and why it's so important in an examination. As shoes get bigger, whether the manufacturer starts at size 6.5 and goes to 15, or whether they start at 7 and only go to 12, each time it gets bigger, it either has to include more design or an enlargement of the same design. So these 2 examples show how that differs and how it can be used in a comparison. On the left is a K-Swiss brick pattern classic design. And the K-Swiss company refers to that as their brick pattern, and the size of the bricks are the same throughout the entire size range. So the dimension of each one of those bricks will be identical in a size 6.5, and a 7, and 12, 14, so forth. What that means is that as the shoe gets bigger, there has to be more bricks to fill the inside of it. And what the arrows are showing, on the left is the larger K-Swiss shoe. The red arrow is pointing to the same approximate area as the smaller shoe on the right. And you can see that there's not as many bricks on the right as there are on the left. So the left actually has a new row of bricks starting. And the bottom arrow on the left shows a similar thing, just in a different portion of the design. And you can find this in many places across these designs. So in this kind of a case, getting samples of the shoe, whether it be from a store or manufacturer, will enable an examiner like myself to determine what size the shoe is. On the right-hand side are two Walmart Athletic Works shoes. And they're an example of what happens when you keep the same content, but the size of that content increases like a photographic enlargement as the shoe gets bigger. So on the right is the larger shoe, and on the left a little bit smaller. And each of those different components are a little bit different in size. But as you go each half size, it's harder to tell that, particularly if the impression at the scene is not real clear or it's only representative of a small area. It becomes more difficult to size a shoe that way. But in addition to the general content of that design, there's an additional thing on this shoe called texture. And I don't know if I can point to this, but for instance, if you look at this particular block as well as the others, I can't reach the others, you can see there's a real fine design in there, and that's different in each mold, and that's referred to generally as texture. There's different ways of creating texture, but there's two primary ways. In this particular way, it was what's known as hand-struck stippling. So this texture is, I will explain in the next slides how that's put on a shoe and why it's different from in each mold.
Okay. And does texture become very important when you are trying to determine the size and brand of a shoe?
If a shoe design contains texture, and not all of them do, if it contains texture, and that texture is clearly visible in the crime scene impression, then it's a very important part of the comparison, whether you're comparing it to a suspected individual shoe or whether you're comparing it for purposes of sizing that shoe.
And triple W3B. And what are we looking at here?
So this slide is showing how in a factory, a artisan is using a steel die, shown with the arrow on it, and on the tip of that die, and you can also see an example of that die on the right side beneath the hammer, on the tip of that die is a pattern, and there are hundreds of patterns to choose from when selecting texture. And that, after the general design of that outsole is made and created in the steel alloy or aluminum, whatever the mold's made of, they will then after that come back, and they may have 8 size 10s or 8 size 11s, and they won't have any texture, but they'll come around and the artisans will, by hand, take a steel die and insert in selected areas, as is shown on the right. We'll put the die tip against the steel mold and strike it hard with a hammer and make an indentation in that mold. And when that's filled with the rubber material and you pull that shoe out, that material won't be depressed, it'll be raised, and you will get the texture pattern like you saw in the previous slide.
Okay. And can you tell us, this is something I should have asked you already, have you personally visited various factories where this kind of process is occurring?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and can you tell us approximately how many of those you have gone to?
I've been to about 25 shoe factories, but I didn't break it down how many of them I saw. And I've been to some mold making factories 2 years ago. A lot of that's offshore now, so it's a long time. I would say I've been at least 4 or 5 where there was mold making involved, and they had this example. But there's also other processes that I've seen at these factories as well.
Okay. And States Exhibit W3C.
Okay, so I think we just let this slide come to the end and I'll explain it. We can show it again because I can't compete with the speed of the video and explain it. This is showing 2 artisans that are in a factory where the outsole mold has already been made, and they're actually creating this texture pattern in certain parts of that outsole design. On the left, the individual in the brown shirt, he's working more slowly, so he's probably creating maybe a row of stars or something where you have a single design on the tip and you're trying to put it in a certain row. On the right, the artisan there in the blue shirt is striking it more frequently, and he is rotating both the mold, and near the end he actually rotates the die in his hand because he's overlapping each strike and rotating it to create a mishmash mixture of that design on the tip. Both of these will be unlike any other mold. And so this is done as quickly as they can do it because the economics is everything in footwear manufacturing. In the end, it's going to create outsole molds that are different from each other.
Okay.
So if we could run that by one more time.
Sure.
I will say that if that die is not straight, it goes at an angle, it changes the shape of that pattern a little bit. If it's hit hard, it goes deeper. If it's lighter, it doesn't go, it's more shallow. And all of those things are normal variables. It's not just, it's the position mainly, but also the features in that position that make it so unique.
Okay. And then again, the number of different items that are placed there within a certain part of the outsole or whatever. It'll change from outsole to outsole.
Every outsole will be different.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell us, were you asked to consult in this case?
Yes, I was.
And can you tell us what you were asked to do?
I was advised that there were a number of impressions from crime scenes, and there were no shoes to compare, but it was their desire to determine the brand and, most importantly, the shoe size of the shoe that made the impressions.
Okay. And can you tell us, were you, well, first of all, do you recall when that request was made?
Approximately June of 2018.
Okay. And in early August of 2018, were you provided with the gel lifts and the flooring cutouts that were obtained in this case?
Yes, those would be the lifts are not the original impression. They're a lift of an impression, but the 4 cutouts, 3 of wood flooring and 1 of vinyl flooring, were actually brought to me for examination.
Okay, so the actual floors that were cut up and removed from the scene were brought to you?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And did you also obtain a DVD of images of the scene impressions and gel lifts?
Yes.
Etc.
So these would be the images that were taken of the various impressions at the crime scene, as well as photographs that were made of the gel lifts. You probably use a copy camera, but rather than because the gel lifts get covered back up. So they usually, when they open them up the first time, they take an picture of them, and that's your best evidence. So they were provided as well.
Okay. Mr. Bozak, I'm going to hand you what has been marked as State's Exhibit W2, 3 W's and a 2. It's an 8 pages stapled together. If you could look at that and tell me if you recognize what that is.
Yeah, this is a copy of my report on the results of my examination, and it's dated August 13th, 2018.
And can you tell us when you were asked to consult on this case and you were provided those various items that we talked about, what did you do next?
Well,
or what did you
I
do?
took my own photographs of the original impressions that were brought. I went through the DVD and all of the images that were presented. My request was specifically regarding Walmart Athletic Works shoe designs. There were other shoe designs in the case and other shoes that were recovered from people, first responders and so forth. And I was not asked to look at those, but just the Walmart athletic shoe design.
Okay. And one of the questions I would have for you is, does the quality of the lifts determine your success?
The quality of the impression at the crime scene is directly related to any result that can be achieved through a forensic footwear comparison. It's just common sense that if somebody twists their foot or slips and you can see no design or just a little part of it, you're not going to be able to conclude as much and make as valid a comparison as you can if it's a nice, a better quality impression.
Okay. And does the process that the crime scene agent used to preserve that impression also affect the quality of your?
Yes. In many cases, they're only photographed. In this case, 4 of the impressions were actually cut out and recovered and were chemically enhanced as well.
Okay. So you indicated that you were asked only to look at these Walmart Athletic Works shoe. Can you tell us what you did as a result of that?
Okay, so should we continue with the slides?
I guess if you just let us know did you make your own test impressions as well?
Yeah, so in the exchange between the BCI investigator Brian White, who brought the evidence to me, and looking at the images of test impressions of shoes that were made by BCI that were on the DVD, I was made aware that these were Walmart Athletic Works shoes. So the solving what kind of brand is it was already done. The day after I received those, I went to the Walmart that was closest to me in Palm Coast, Florida, and went to the men's shoes department, and they still had this brand and this design shoe. And I took with me small areas, picture of the images showing the texture of a couple of the impressions. And knowing that I could look at that texture and just take a shoe out of the box and turn it over and see if those mold characteristics were alike or different. So after spending a while at Walmart, I found many different sizes and shoes in size 10, 11, 12 that were different mold features, different texture, but I also was able to find one size 10.5 and one size 11 that corresponded in texture. So I purchased 3 pairs, size 10, 10.5, and 11 for purposes of further examination.
And let's go to the next slide. Sorry. And can you tell us what we're looking at there?
Okay, so these, at the bottom left is a portion of the toe area of one of the size 10.5 Walmart athletic shoes that I purchased for the comparison of texture. On the bottom right is a size 11 that I purchased. If you just look at the two bottom impressions and you look at the texture, if I may point to that, and the different portions of the shoe, at the size you're looking at them, which would be very close to just turning the shoes over in the store if you were looking at them there, they both look the same. They have texture, looks the same at a quick glance. But I know, and the fact is that this texture is extremely different between different molds because of the random way that it's applied. And so I've taken one portion of each shoe, which the red arrow is connecting, and I've enlarged it just to show how different they are. And I've just put 2 green arrows in each, but you can look around the entirety of that particular block and see how different the texture is when you look at it more definitively like I would in a forensic examination. So this is an example of how the Walmart Athletic Shoe Works has hand-struck stippling that is different from each mold, and there will only be one size 10.5 that has that particular texture and one size 11 that will have that particular texture.
And you have elected to enlarge that particular segment, but if you enlarged each of these segments, would there be differences?
Yes, you would find the same variances.
Okay. And did you prepare a hard copy of that particular slide?
Yes, because I didn't know how clear, when I come to court, I never know how clear the displays will be, and some of this is small, so I prepared a hard copy that would enable the court to see this better.
Okay. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to hand this to the jurors, and they can just look at it and pass it down as they are able to look at it.
Has defense seen it?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's just this.
Oh, it's the same thing?
Yeah.
Any objection?
No objection.
It's triple W3D. Okay. We can go to triple W3E, which is the next slide. Okay, and again, can you tell us what we are looking at here?
This is another example on the left of the difference in texture between not only the 11 and the 10.5, but the texture in each of these would be unique to one mold only. So on the left are 2 of the Walmart Athletic Works shoes that I purchased in Florida. One is 10.5 and one is 11. And just like the prior example, this is another portion of those shoes with 2 green examples, but again, you can look at the entirety of that block that show the tremendous variation in the texture pattern. So when that shows up in a crime scene impression, it's very useful for both inclusion, meaning it came from the same mold, which means it's the same size, or exclusion, meaning you can exclude that shoe because it does not have the same texture. So it's good for both of those purposes.
Okay. And once again, Mr. Bodziak, did you prepare a hard copy for better examination of this?
I did.
Okay. And Your Honor, again, if I could please provide this to the jury.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. Going to State's Exhibit Triple W3F. Okay. Oops. So, Mr. Bodziak, after you had obtained these shoes that you had determined for yourself were the same as the test impressions from Ohio, I guess, did you make test impressions of those shoes?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you use those for comparison to the footwear impressions that had been recovered from the two different scenes in this case?
Yes.
And can you tell us what we are looking at in this particular slide?
So these are pictures of four original impressions that were recovered from the scene. The two on the left and the one on the far right are pieces of wooden floor that were cut out. And the one that's marked 23 is a vinyl flooring that was cut out. And they're marked 21, 22, 23, and 24. And these were represented to me as coming from the 4077 Union Hill Road scene.
Okay. And just because we haven't visited this in a little while, although I think, and to make sure that it's clear, yes?
Can I grab your request?
Yeah.
And item 24.
Okay. Able to read
To the Walmart athletic shoes. Things that prevent a perfect representation of just one tapping of the shoe. And so there are some areas here that you can't see the texture, or it's
used to preserve that impression also affect the quality of your...
Yes, in many cases they're only photographed.
The scene impressions and gel lifts.
Yes, this is that I've seen at these factories as well.
Okay. And State's Exhibit Triple W3C. Tell us what we're looking at there.
You can exclude that shoe because it does not have the same texture. So it's good for both of those purposes.
Okay. 21, 22, 23, and 20. And to make sure that it's clear. Yes?
Can I grab your request?
Yeah. Yeah, you probably can't see that very well.
That's okay, I can try.
Okay, so if you need to refer to report, then please do so. There are, on your slide, we have items 21, 22, 23, and 24. Are you able to tell us, for instance, item 21, what was the respective evidence number for that? I believe that's on the first page under your item 3, actually, that has this.
Yeah, in my report, the 4 flooring cutouts, all 4 of these on this slide, were sent to me as item 3, but they're also described as items 21, 22, 23, and 24. And then they're also described as, respectively, as 23, 24, 35, and 47. This happens quite frequently with a police department assigning one number, a lab assigning another number, and so on and so forth. So I try to put all these in there so they can be connected.
Okay. And so specifically, item 21 is respective evidence number 23, is that correct?
21 would be 23 here.
Okay. And then item 22 then is evidence,
And evidence 24 right here.
okay. And then item 23,
Item 23 is 35, which is way over here.
okay. And then item 24.
24 is item 47, which is back in the wood floor.
Okay. And specifically, I guess you have the order. Let's go ahead and go to State's Exhibit WW3G.
Well, if I could,
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't finished on this, if I may.
Sorry,
Okay.
yeah.
So just while all of them are up together, item 21 and item 24, the ones on the end, they were a left shoe impression that corresponded with a size 11 Walmart athletic work shoe. 22 corresponded with the left size 10.5 Walmart athletic shoe. 23, it was possible to see some similarities in the design, but none of the texture and the completeness of the impression. It was distorted and incomplete.
Okay. And did you attribute that to anything, the fact that that was not good for comparison?
Well, you can see that there's movement and distortion in it. You can see it's incomplete. Particularly up in the toe area, you can see it's blurred and slid. It's not uncommon to find impressions at scenes, whether it be in mud or wet mud or blood or other items that contribute to being slippery. And then just the normal movement, a person might pivot their foot or slide their foot. They may be impressions that come about during a struggle or other things. So finding distorted or smeared impressions like this at a scene is fairly common.
Okay. State's Exhibit WW3H. And can you tell us what we're looking at there?
I think we skipped a slide. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't. Go ahead. I've already talked about that. Okay, this is item 21, which was the picture on the left of the prior slide. And because the texture is so small and I'm trying to demonstrate some of the observations I made, I've taken just a small part of the crime scene impression 21 with a green box around it, and connecting to the green arrow in the center is an enlargement of that small area, and over top of that is a transparency of the test impression, which is black. The impression is purple, and it's superimposed over it. And so you can see where you have a clear representation of the texture. The known impression, which is from the portion of the shoe on the right of this exhibit, fits over the respective texture portions. Even the portions that you have little ovals here, it's part of the design where there's no texture at all. You can also see that.
Okay. And once again, did you prepare a hard copy of that particular slide?
I did.
Okay. And Your Honor, may I provide this to the jury?
Any objections?
No.
You may.
Okay. And the next slide, W3I, I believe you also already provided us this information, but if you could tell us what we're looking at there.
So the prior slide was item 21, and the conclusion was it was a size 11 Walmart athletic shoe, as is 24. The 22 pertains to the impression that I concluded was a size 10.5. And so that's the one that's in red, marked 22. And I also made that same type of comparison using the texture to link it to a specific mold that was a size 10.5.
Okay. And I believe the next State's Exhibit W3J. Can you tell us what we're looking at there?
Yeah, on the left, item 22 is a Luco Crystal Violet LCV enhanced photograph of that piece of wooden flooring. And the primary impression at the bottom is the Walmart athletic shoe design. On the right is an example of how I would use a transparency. So that's the highlight, the lightened portion, superimposing it over that impression at the same scale. And so that anything that appears in the crime scene impression, I would be able to compare the respective portions of the design as well as the texture with that. And I concluded that it corresponded with a 10.5 Walmart athletic shoe.
State's Exhibit WWW3K.
So this is an even larger portion of item 22. Again, not knowing how well easy this would be to see on a screen. And so this is just a portion of the texture of that impression, drastically enlarged. And the next slide is that same image, but with the overlay over it. So if we were to go to the next slide and back and then do that a couple times slowly, it would be a way of showing you what I'm seeing in my comparison when I superimpose that test impression and I'm looking at the texture and I'm pulling it back and I'm looking back and forth during this comparison. So if we could toggle between this and the next slide a couple times.
Yep, the next slide being WWW-3L. So go ahead and go back.
So if we could stop right there, and I would add that obviously there are areas in this impression, as is typically found, where there's excess blood, other blood spatter, interferences is what we call them, things that prevent a perfect representation of just one tapping of the shoe. And so there are some areas here that are, you can't see the texture, or it's maybe there's so much blood it's squeezing out and making that little piece of texture a little larger than it was. But there's plenty of good quality texture in this and the rest of that impression to reach this conclusion.
Okay. And then did you also provide a hard image with both of those States Exhibit WWW3K and 3L side by side?
I did.
Okay. And Your Honor, may I provide that to the jury?
And if you may.
I just put K and L on the same one on that. So I just made the hard images the same as the slide that they correspond to. Okay, so back to, I guess, why don't we go back to 3F, which will be C, yeah. You said 21 and 24 were the size 11.
That's correct.
Correct. And again, that would be our evidence number 23 and 47. Can you show us where the 23 and 47 are up there?
47 is here, 23 is here.
Okay. And then the 10 and a half, I believe you said was item 22, which corresponds to evidence number 24.
And that's here.
Okay. And were you then asked to also look at some images or foot impressions from a different location?
Yes, I was.
And can you tell us how those impressions were provided to you?
They were provided through photographic images, and some of them were gel lifted too.
Okay. And again, did you use the test impressions that you had made from the shoes that you had purchased from Walmart?
I did, yes.
The next slide, which is WWW-3M. It's this. Oh, yep, okay. This is actually referring back to the one from the one on the linoleum that you said you were unable to reach a conclusion on because of the slippage, correct?
I could reach a conclusion it was a similar design, but I couldn't examine it any further because the detail just was not there. Similarities are pointed with the arrows. There's some of the circles at the top in the design and at the bottom and in the middle, and some general parallel lines in the heel area, but not really much detail. It's pretty distorted and pretty partial.
Okay. States Exhibit WWW-3N. Can you tell us what we are looking at there?
This is images, 3 images that I was provided for examination, taken of flooring from the address at 3122 Union Hill Road. And along with the description of these, the descriptions were made prior to me calling these 3 226 tread A, 226 tread B, and 213. So I kept those same item numbers.
Okay. And States Exhibit triple W3O. Can you tell us what we're looking at there?
So using the prior slide, there were 3. This was the one on the left that's repeated and marked 226 tread A. On the right is a slight digital enhancement. You see the same material. Some prefer to look at one versus the other, so I put both of them up there. But this is a portion of vinyl or linoleum flooring and the photographic images of those. And along the left side primarily, so it would be along this side here, is some of the design similar to the Walmart athletic shoes, and it does show some textured areas.
Okay. And so were you able to make a comparison based on those textured areas?
Yes, I was.
Okay. States Exhibit triple W3P. And can you tell us what we're looking at there?
So on the right is another photograph of a portion of that 226 tread A. In the center, with the red line connecting them, I've made even a greater enlargement of a portion of that. You can start to see that the texture actually does show up sufficiently for comparison. And then on the left, in kind of an orange color, so I could demonstrate the contrast between them better, is one of the known impressions in orange over the image that's in the center of this, showing how the texture in some of those areas still corresponds. Therefore, I was able to conclude that it corresponded with the size 11 Walmart athletic shoe. Came from that same mold, which was a size 11.
Okay. And then States Exhibit triple W3Q.
This was the center picture in the original slide of all 3, 226 tread B. In this particular exhibit, I'm just showing again what a full-size test impression of the left shoe size 11 looks like when I use a natural size enlargement of 226 tread B and superimpose it over the Walmart athletic shoe design on that. And again, there was sufficient texture here to conclude it was a size 11.
And then States Exhibit triple W3R.
Yeah, this was the image on the right side of that original 3-panel exhibit, image 213. You can see a very faint portion of a similar a portion of design that's similar to a portion of the Walmart Athletic Works design, but it's so fragmented, so partial, and so incomplete that I can't link it to any specific size or mold. And so it's similar to all of the 10.5, the 11, and even an item 69 shoe, which I examined.
And were you also asked to look at a size 10 Athletic Works shoe?
I did purchase a size 10 Athletic Works shoe. It didn't correspond with any of the crime scene impressions, except this one here, because it's so limited, I can't even make that same type of comparison. So I can't exclude this impression from anything, but all of the others I was able to exclude the size 10.
Okay. And so in this particular scene, I guess we can put that up there too. I believe it says on here, and I'm not sure if you have the corresponding, but it says this 25 is the gel lift of developed shoe print, and we've had other testimony, but the only footwear impressions that you were able to look at there, both you determined were size 11.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And Mr. Boziak, can you tell us, are all of these opinions that you concluded regarding the various sizes that you were able to either rule in or rule out, are those all to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, they are.
And I lied. Bear with me. I have one more thing to put up here because I promised I would. It's an image, and it ties all this together. I am very pleased with these videos, except for when I thought I lost the sound. I'm looking for the really pretty picture I made that ties it all together. And here it is. Okay, and I'm gonna size it to stretch to screen, fit the screen. This is the wait a minute, no. This one might not be it. Forget that. Let's take that image off. Let's see if we can't find the other image. Yeah. Let me find the other image. I got the wrong image. Hold on. I'm tired, you can tell. Add image source. You can tell I am very tired. But I wanted to get this done. This is the image I wanted to share with you. And then let's go okay. And let's transform, hit the screen. Yay! There, we got it. This is the end. This is what I wanted to give to you. This is the findings in all of the footwear impressions evidence. Like I said, I think they were kind of stupid because they didn't do anything to the bottom of their shoes. And they could link all the bottoms of these shoes to the Walmart shoes. Angela saved the receipt for some reason, lied to BCI agents, said she threw them away, and it's all black and white. You can't get more blatant than what it is. But a lot of work went into this. My hat's off to the BCI crime agency that put all this together. Now, have a great day and an even better tomorrow.